Greetings. By virtue of your presence watching this video today, I want you to know that we consider you to be an extended member of our family at Unity in Linwood. We believe that you are an individualized expression of that one creative impetus which stands behind all life. And as such, we celebrate the uniqueness which you are, and we celebrate our unity with you. We are glad you're with us.
Practical spirituality, welcoming community. Unity in Bellevue only got 4 words that they could use for their mission statement. Other Unity churches get more. What did I say? Practical spirituality, welcoming community. Unity in Linwood only got 4 words. Unity in Bellevue got 6. And they still don't know what they are. Pardon me, I know what he's saying. Okay. No, I bear responsibility. That's another story that'll be coming up rather quickly. So one of the problems I always have is that often I'm asked for a title of a talk I'm going to give some weeks later. And that's always a challenge because it usually occurs that by the time I get there, that title no longer fits. This talk was originally titled The Power of Words. But now it's called We're in This Together. Because we are. And what we're in together is absolutely inclusive sea of consciousness. In Jewish tradition and in the Bible that we share, there are things called the 10 Commandments. In the Torah itself, they're never called commandments. They're called principles. Because what they really are descriptions. It's like an operating manual for planet Earth. If you want to get along in this place, this is how it works. If you don't want to get along, this will define and describe what's necessary to not get along. And the first of the principles, incidentally, they're numbered differently in Jewish tradition, in Protestant tradition, and in Catholic tradition. Because the Bible didn't actually come with a numbered system. I love those things where you see Moses coming down with Roman numerals on the tablets. It's like, so the very first of the principles in Jewish tradition is, I am the eternal one, your God. I am the one who frees you from enslavement, any enslavement. It's the principle of oneness. It's basically the essential positive principle in Jewish tradition. There's only one, and that awakening to that one is the way out of stuckness and out of enslavement. Because ultimately enslavement, although it can be awful on a physical level, it claims our identity. And it claims our identity. The antidote to that is awakening to our true identity. The second of the principles is, you shall have no other gods before you. And basically what that is the confusion of an object of consciousness with consciousness itself. Making any object of consciousness the goal, the power, the authority is idolatrous because it's always separative. It always takes away from the fullness of consciousness. And everything is an object of consciousness. I mean, if you're just aware, we have this infinite flow of consciousness in which we live and which flows through us. Everything we see, we hold in that consciousness. Everything we hear, everything we touch is held in that consciousness. There's nowhere else for anything to be. Without that consciousness, there would be nothing. But to confuse a particular aspect of what's held in consciousness with the universal of consciousness itself gets us into terrible trouble. We wind up separated from each other. We wind up in terrible dilemmas of polarization, and we wind up killing each other. Idolatry is the way, the fabric of humankind falls apart, deteriorates, fragments, and we see it. The principle of oneness, the principle of inclusivity is the way of healing. That positive principle is the basic positive principle in Jewish tradition, unfolding from which are all the other positive principles. And the negative principle against idolatry is the essential negative principle from which come all other negatives. Like, in a way, that's all we'd need. And then we have the third principle, called the third commandment. Anybody know what that is? You know, I know that some people in Unity read a Bible. It's this big book. It's Listen, dear Michelle already gave my second talk, so the third principle is usually translated, do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. All right? Remember? Now, I don't know how it was for you, but when I was growing up, that meant don't swear, which is really rather incredible when you think of it. The first principle is there's only one. The second principle is no idolatry. And the third principle is don't swear. It comes before don't murder. It comes before don't steal. It comes don't swear. And what's really sad is that most of us who learned it that way went, yeah, okay. As if what? You say a swear word and it doesn't mean that. The Hebrew says, Lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. You cannot use the name of the Eternal One, your God, and have nothing happen. You can't use God's name and have nothing happen. What's God's name? Moses is the only one who ever asked God, what's your name? It's a great passage. He's in front of what gets called the burning bush. He hears the call to go free the people. He says, I'm going to go down there. They're going to say, who sent me? What's your name? And the name is perfect. The name he hears is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. It means I am as I am. I am as I am, which is consciousness before an object. I am not predicated yet. I am the consciousness yearning for predication, yearning to hold all the objects that it can hold. And you can't use the name and have nothing happen. Well, the fact is, we use God's name more than we use any other name. We're always using God's name. We're always saying, I am this, I am not that. I feel good, I feel bad, I feel worried, I am concerned. I'm happy, I'm unhappy. And anytime we use the name of God, it's going to have an impact. That's why it's the third principle. It's the third principle that says, watch what you say. Watch what you say. I had a great example from Jenny just before, who said, your shoulder.
Oh, my shoulder is weak.
She said, she was talking to a body worker, and she said,
This shoulder is weak.
and the body worker said,
Don't call it names. Don't call it names.
it doesn't, I love that. My shoulder, instead of saying my shoulder is weak, you say, my shoulder has weakness. My shoulder has an issue with weakness. Oh, it's becoming sensitive. That's why originally I called this the power of words. But I'm not going to talk about that. We exist in an infinite sea of consciousness. We are connected always by an infinite ocean of awareness. That awareness flows through us, and we hold everything, every thought, every feeling, every perception, every sensation in that consciousness. And it's true that sometimes we confuse the object that we're holding with consciousness itself. But consciousness is just ever loving, and the sense of its love is it accepts anything. It accepts everything. All the thoughts, all the judgments, it just goes, okay. But because we share a common pool, a common ocean, a common stream of consciousness, everything that we hold contributes to that sea. And everything that anyone has ever held contributes to that sea, so that that ocean of consciousness is nourished by what we feed it, and we in turn are nourished by that pool of consciousness. We are connected, so that everything and anything that occurs, I remember being really upset by the idea. This comes from medieval Jewish philosophy and Muslim philosophy particularly, where God knows every leaf that falls. No leaf falls without God knowing it. And it used to be this quandary for me. What was that talking about? But if God is all consciousness, then everything that happens in consciousness. There's nowhere else to be. There's nowhere else being can happen, so that we have a responsibility what we put into that pool. And we have a responsibility for what we do with that which already is in that pool. Which leads us to what will be our next song. And it's a Hawaiian mantra, a Hawaiian prayer called the Ho'oponopono. And the Ho'oponopono is a Hawaiian word that means to make things right. It's a word that speaks of deep forgiveness. The particular prayer statement that we're going to share was utilized by a psychologist in a locked ward in a hospital in Hawaii that held criminally insane. And after several years, he never met any of the inmates. He sat in a room with their files, and he was repeating, "I'm sorry. please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Not because he was accepting blame, not because he was accepting guilt, but because everything that occurred is held in consciousness. There's nowhere else for it to be. And each of us has the possibility of healing the wounds. And there are deep wounds. And those wounds are reflected in the challenges that we face in our world right now. So this is one of the ways of stepping into that pool, allowing it to be part of your meditation. So this congregation, along with many others, has kind of joined with a pledge of seeking to encourage the people who participate to spend some time every day praying for peace. I don't know if you know that, but you're on the list. And can you dedicate some moments every day to praying for peace? And if you're praying for peace, what do you do? You know, this notion, I mean, you know, it's not like there's some agency out there that's going to do something for us. It's about awakening the consciousness of peace. And how do we do that? This is one of the ways of doing that. You know, so we offered these words. They're not even Jewish. Although they may have been found in a jar no, it's really about seeking out the wisdom wherever that wisdom emerges and being sensitive enough to recognize it, to be available for it. It's like every authentic spiritual tradition has something to offer, because the nature of an authentic spiritual tradition is that it is an avenue to a shared universal. It's an avenue to awakening. And ultimately the goal, you know, I work with an imam and a pastor as the rabbinic member of the Interfaith Amigos, and it's like, can I get there using your path? Where is it in your tradition? And if it's not there, find it. Because if it's an authentic tradition, it's got to be there. The universal is hiding where you least suspect it. One of the things we do is we've asked ourselves, if we weren't the religion we are, what religion would we want to be? Like if this wasn't my faith, if I was not to be Jewish, what would I choose to be? And for many years, my answer to that was Buddhist. Like Buddhism sounds really cool. And of course, we American Buddhists are often unaware of the sectarianism and the infighting of the Buddhist communities, you know, so it looks like they don't have any of that. But guess what? But recently my choice has shifted. And I realized some time ago that if I was not this religion, I would choose to be Christian. Which is interesting to hear me say. But one of the reasons has to do with today. And it obviously is something that's important because Michelle remembered the whole thing. So I have nothing to add to that. No, the point is, if I were Christian, I'd like to be a minister, a unity minister. I'd like to really tell people and remind people how critical Sunday is. I mean critical. As Michelle mentioned, the most important holiday in Jewish tradition is Shabbat. More important than the high holidays, more important than Passover. The most important holiday comes every week. No argument about that. And Shabbat is about the completion of creation. It follows the myth in Genesis. Creation is done. What do? You live in it. You inhabit it. And how do you inhabit it? You inhabit with blessing. You inhabit with yesness. So the challenge that Jewish tradition brings is, at the end of the week, is the challenge of looking at everything and going yes. And feeling the ego rise up and go, what? How can you bless that? If you bless that, if you say yes to that, it'll never change. And we got to go, poor ego. I know that's what you think, but you've got it backwards. It's what we resist that remains. It's what we resist that we get stuck in. What we absolutely accept, what we absolutely love, has the freedom to evolve, has the freedom to change. When we are able to absolutely accept ourselves as we are in this very moment, we are free to change. And if every week we could end the week with that kind of acceptance and that kind of love for self, for other, for the whole world, for the planet, that's feeding consciousness. That's feeding the pool of shared consciousness with yes. And if I were a minister in the Christian tradition, I would say, all right, Christian responsibility is setting intentions for the creation that's about to be. The ancient tradition talks about everything was created in a week. You know, and science goes, well, actually it didn't work that way. But sometimes I think every week we create everything. Sunday is the Lord's Day. And it's the day of the rising of possibility. The rising of possibility, because if one ends with blessing, ends the week with yesness, ends the week with gratitude, then that opens the way for something yearning to be born, something yearning to be reborn. The problem with a lot of what happened to Lord's Day is it got particularized, it got objectified rather than universalized. It was a quintessential symbol of possibility. And it got turned into idolatry. So it's reclaiming that because it's authentic and it's real and it's critical and we need it. So if you were to take that responsibility and know that every Sunday you have responsibility for setting the intentions for the week of creation that is unfolding now, what would be your intentions? I'm not going to call on you, but I am hoping there's something working in there. And the first thing you think of are conditions, right? What would I like to create as the conditions in my world? What do I want to fix? What do I want to make better, huh? But real creation is not a what. The real intentions have to be a who. Who is it I want to be walking into this week? Because true creation is going to follow the state of our being. True creation is always following the state of our consciousness. It can't help it. We all know that. A loving consciousness draws love. An angry consciousness draws anger. It's simple. A consciousness of abundance draws abundance. A consciousness of lack draws lack. It's not a matter of blame. It's not a matter of guilt. It's a matter of consciousness. It's the way things work. How are we going to use the name of God this week? And this week starts right now.
Thanks again for joining us. Please visit unityandlinwood.org for a preview of all upcoming classes, services, and events, and for an opportunity to make a gift to our community should you so choose. Thank you.